I'd like to thank our friends at Sardine for making today's episode possible. It's good to have a fraud squad behind you, and with Sardine, you get the best fraud squad around. With Sardine, you get a full team behind you that isn't afraid to roll up their sleeves and jump right in with you. From onboarding and payment fraud to KYC, they have over 4,000 signals like device, email, telco, and AML monitoring to help you make the right decisions. Of course, they have a rule builder, custom ML models, and they even ship new features weekly. You're not buying just one of the best tools, but the whole fraud squad behind it. Please give them a warm welcome by visiting www.sardine.ai today to learn more. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Fraud Boxer. I have a very special episode to me happening here today. I have Marc Shea, who actually is the whole reason that I am in fraud to this day. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what he means to me and all that fun stuff. So how are you doing today, Marc?
I'm doing well. Thanks, man. How are you?
I am doing pretty good. As you have been dealing with me in our pre-studio session, my morning's been very active with getting this TV repaired, and that's stories for other shows. If you guys have ever listened to my stuff, you'll know the saga of that. But I'm really happy to be doing this with you because, like I said, you were very important in my fraud journey, and now you're on my fraud show. But you were the recruiter that actually recruited me to work full-time in fraud. So
Yes.
that's cool, and we'll tell that story in a minute. But let's hear a little bit about your background if we could, and then we'll tell that story to get everything started.
Yeah, me personally, I'm married. I have two kids. We live in Western Pennsylvania, about 50 miles north of Pittsburgh. I went to the University of Pittsburgh and graduated in, I guess, 98. Gosh, forever ago. A degree in rhetoric and communication, and moved to California about a year after that and started my journey out there, which led me into HR and recruiting. It started out working in production for a visual effects company
Oh,
called Digital Domain. Yeah, I was doing light stage work, but also a lot of like just general office work. And then
is that why you came to California?
uh,
Was it, did you want to work in film?
I had sort of wanted to work in film, but really I was looking for just a big change in my life at that time. And so my brother had moved out to California a couple of
Mm.
years before, up to Santa Barbara to go to film school, and ended up moving down to LA and just decided like, hey, I'm going to pack up my car and, make the drive from Pennsylvania to
Wow.
Los Angeles, and did it. And yeah, spent 22 years there, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, and like during your time here, I mean, look at even working in the visual effects, but you recruited me working at one of the large studios. So we were employees at some point of NBC Universal, and you were the one that actually recruited me into that there. And started as a contractor. I think you were a contractor the whole time. That's kind of how they run those particular departments there. I think it's pretty common,
Yes.
especially in recruiting. But I remember, and we'll tell the story now because we'll just get it started out here. I had just moved back to Southern California from Portland. I had lived in LA, proper LA. I live actually Beverly Hills. I moved here in 2007. And I spent I spent from 2007 to late 2009 living there. And then I went back to Oregon for about a year and a half. And that was, the economy was dead. There wasn't a lot of jobs, it was a difficult time for a lot of people. And I've told this story before, even on this own show, but like I was taking call center work, and the vertical that I was in before was action sports. So skateboarding, those sorts of things. But I dabbled in technology for a few years as well, doing special projects for the CEO of a large software company. And that like dipped my toe in a lot of different areas in technology as far as like video editing goes, running the business. And then I started my own skateboard company. But coming out of that, because nobody was buying skateboards when the economy was dead, uh, they I started taking call center work, and one of those was Netflix, doing regular incoming calls. But like I've said a couple of times on here before, one of the calls that we started getting was card testing, and it was a lot of fraudulent activity that we were seeing. But I kept getting the calls. I mean, everybody in the call center was getting the calls, but it was something that I was friends with the people in the research department. So I was able to make a phone call back there and say, hey, I kept seeing this account. And then we started seeing, like, they told me that was card testing. We were aware that we had just started this, what's called $0 authorization. Hopefully everybody listening to the show knows what $0 authorization is. If you don't, talk to your payments people, talk to anybody. But long story short, or even long, I guess, I came back to Southern California without a gig, and I was applying at a bunch of places for customer service stuff. And that is where you stumbled upon my resume, and you had actually posted the job, or somebody posted the job on Craigslist of all places. So do you have any recollection of that at all?
What did we decide how long ago was this? Like
This was
11 years or so?
2011, like
Yeah,
at least 2011.
13, 12
So,
years.
and I think it
I
was a
have some
customer
recollection.
service role. Yeah, I think it was a customer service role actually initially. So, yeah,
I think it was. I have vague recollection at Fandango or NBC Universal, as you mentioned. We did use Craigslist to post jobs in that realm. And I don't think we had much of a fraud department at that time. But again, like it was over a decade ago. And
yeah,
you know, as Indiana Jones says, it's not the age, it's the mileage. But um, I do remember. I do remember your resume in the sense that it stood out to me. I know we had talked before during, sort of prep work
some
for the
prep.
show
Yeah,
about, gosh, it would be amazing if we could find that resume, but unfortunately neither of us could. But I remember it stood out amongst a number of other resumes that we would have received. And, we went through the interview process and you made a really strong impression and, offered you the job. And now here we are 12 or whatever
yeah,
years later, and you've
and
built
you're
an
on my
amazing
show.
career for yourself. And I'm on your show.
Yeah, I will say, like, I don't know, I can't remember if like we talked about it in prep to the extent, but the I remember when you sent me the email. It said, hey, we're gonna do some interviews here. Would you be interested? And then we set up the times. I remember that when I drove there to meet with who was my boss. We're not going to talk about his name here on the show. And Jad, who was one of the head of engineering over there at the time. Uh, I had $30 left in my bank account, 30 total. And I spent all of that money to drive from La Mirada, California to, it was on the edge of Santa Monica, Olympic and Bundy, where the train station is now, to go to this interview. Like, it was like I gave it everything I had. I had no other source of income, no way that, like, this was like all the eggs were in this basket. And I'll never forget, I came back after the interviews. I will never forget that I was back in La Mirada on Beach Boulevard, in La Mirada Boulevard. There's a Chevron station there. And I have my car parked in front of like where the air pump is. And I didn't have enough money to put any more gas in my car. And I was sitting on like the little concrete tube that goes across, like that stops your car from like rolling into the next parking lot over. And I was like, just defeated. I was done. Like, what am I going to do? Where is my life going? And then I got the email that you guys would like to offer me. Like, I was literally sitting on that exact spot. And that spot that day in that email has like completely changed my whole life, like forever. So thank you for sending that email and with job offer in
You're
it, because
welcome.
that was really cool. So yeah, there's that story. I've not
Those are
really
the
told the
best
whole thing
stories.
before.
Those are the best stories. That's what I love about recruiting. I love giving people an opportunity, connecting people together, connecting people with companies, and seeing success and people building their careers like you've done from, a customer service agent, probably making minimum wage. I don't recall exactly,
Yeah,
but somewhere thereabouts or slightly above, to the amazing work you're doing now as sort of with, a pioneer in this sort of niche area of fraud and asset protection, from my experience on the retail side. But yeah,
yeah,
it's it's
same thing.
it's
Yeah,
it's it's awesome.
yeah. Well, thank you for that. So let's talk a little bit about recruiting and how it works for you, because you are now an independent person and like you spend some time. Universal has a bunch of different arms. There's Universal Music, which I believe kind of runs separately from NBC Universal, if I'm not mistaken. But then you were at Guitar Center for a really long time too, up in Westlake Village, which is kind of, used to live up in Woodland Hills there. I used to go golfing over in Westlake at the Westlake Municipal course. It's actually one of my favorite courses
Nice
because it was
course.
in damn good shape for being a
It's
muni
a nice
course.
course. Yeah.
But let's talk about recruiting. I did a recruiting episode last year. There was too many people on it, which I thought it was a great episode. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I love, and I want to thank those people for being on it. But we didn't really get to some of the things that I wanted to get to about recruiting on that, just because we were talking about everybody's philosophies on there. So of course I want to talk about your philosophies, but like talk about like what you do and what recruiting means to you, if you could, if that's okay.
Yeah. So in my current role, I am an independent consultant. My wife and I partner together on our business.
That's cool.
And I love the things that I love to do most are executive recruiting or just leadership recruiting in general. I think that that's some place where I can make a really big impact and have recruiting strategy, whether it's designing strategy for large, multi-billion dollar companies or even smaller boutique management consulting agencies and in between, or helping on the operational model, like how recruiting works and how recruiters should work and the tools and technology that they have. Um, those are the types of things that I do and,
So
and, and enjoy working on.
So you'll go into a business that like basically doesn't have a recruiting department and help them set up a recruiting department, or somebody that's having maybe a bad time in a recruiting department, set up a better, put some processes in place, right? Like that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so I've done that for a handful of companies, whether it was sort of building it up from something suboptimal or starting from scratch and really building it from scratch. And if you do it right, or what I think is right, or adopting best practices that I've been able to be exposed to and help think through over the course of my career, um, yeah, you can make a huge impact. You can recruit great leaders and operators. You can influence and affect EBITDA and profit. You can shape culture. You can design organizations. I mean, all of that stuff can be driven
Yeah.
from highly effective recruiting. Yeah.
So two things here. So at this company that I'm at now at iHerb, I was executive recruited into my role. And that was my first time being like fully like where I had basically an agent. That's what I thought of this person as an agent that brought me in. And I thought, I mean, not a lot of people are going to be able to be in that position, like you're not going to get executive recruited if you're an entry level person necessarily. But for me, like the agency did really well at like negotiating those harder conversations for me to have. But for my business that I'm at now, for iHerb, like I understand like there's a cost to them to have that sort of thing, which is to have this person do it for me. Like they got to pay a percentage, like 10, 20, 25%, I think, on some of these contracts just to get like one person in, which can be daunting. But I will say, like, the guy had a pretty good understanding of like what my needs were going to be, if that makes sense. Like what my, like I think he had prepped them pretty well on like, if you're going to recruit for this role, these are the types of things that you're about to have to deal with. Like, are you guys ready to deal with that? Does that make sense? How I'm framing that kind of.
Yeah, I think a good recruiter should definitely be a bridge between the organization and the candidate pool and ultimately the person that you'll bring through the offer process. I think that good recruiting should be really intimately tied to the business and not just on a personal level, but also recruiters really need to understand the business strategy in order to function at a really high level. You could have
Yeah.
recruiting going on operationally, but unless you understand, like, these are the high level objectives we have as a business, and therefore these are the types of people that we need to lead and operate, can you really do the best possible job that you can? And then that can translate out into turnover problems because maybe it never goes perfectly every single time. We're
Yeah.
human, so nothing is
Yeah.
perfect
They
because
aren't
we're
all
not
going to be
perfect.
me.
Exactly. But if you do it right and you've got a really sound interview process and you bring the right people into it, and have the right assessment process, at the end of the interviews, then I think you can more often than not largely get to the right answer for someone who will be able to join the organization, hit the ground running to a reasonable degree, though I don't think anybody can ever truly do that because there are always, proprietary tools or processes
Yeah.
or just the bureaucracy that you have to wade through at each different organization. But to be able to start doing meaningful work quickly, I think is the result of a sound process that definitely involves transparency, like you mentioned. Like, it's really important that to the best of our ability, we communicate what the role is, what the expectations are, what challenges someone might face when they step in, so that what they step into looks largely like what we had talked about throughout the process. It's never going to be perfect because there's some things you can't share, but largely yes.
Yeah, so this is I'm getting a lot of thoughts coming back. There's a couple of things too. Like you mentioned culture earlier, and I want to talk about that. I do want to drill into that a little bit. But hitting the ground running, I think, is something that's important. Like we had talked about that on my last episode that just came out. That the feeling of imposter syndrome when you join a new organization, because there are those unknown variables, like the certain proprietary information that can't be told. There might be certain projects that are being worked on that it can't be talked about. That's what you're being hired for, and they could be like, we can't really tell you about this because it's like a stealth startup that's about to launch a product that might be a disruptor. You don't want to know about it, but at the same time, like you know, I think it's important for people to understand like hitting the ground running doesn't mean changing the whole process overnight. It just
No.
means being able to offer like some sort of value, the whether that be organizing the team, listening, just giving knowledge. Like one of the things, like Dwayne, you remember Dwayne, like you
Yeah.
recruited him too, because we both went in for the same role, but we ended up getting hired. He took that customer service role, and they created a new role for me. But he is at a new company that does this really cool interactive video stuff, and at, so his big contribution isn't necessarily overhauling what he got hired to do, but he said, "Hey, I found this problem area that you guys are going to encounter. I know a guy," and that guy was me, and we should talk about this. And that was his easy early contribution. Is I found this problem. It's not necessarily what I do. I'm not trying to change things overnight, but I just want you guys to be aware. And he brought me in for knowledge to help them become more aware of what they're doing. And just bringing knowledge alone, like, is can sometimes be enough while you work on changing the underlying processes. Does that make sense for me
It does.
as the individual that joins companies often?
It does. I think that I've never had the inclination when I joined a job to start turning tables over, and
Ooh,
like
good.
act like I know everything and like we got to change everything. And so I've seen that, I've experienced it, and it's uncomfortable, and it can be more than that. It can be demoralizing. It can be whatever. But to me, yes, you need to come in. You need to spend time listening and observing, and not just like, hey, this is how we do things, but like, how have we gotten here? Why are we doing things the way we're doing things? Because if I start pulling at this thread, how many other departments is it going to touch? And if I don't know that, then how can I make an
Yes.
intelligent decision about the things that I change? But then there's the idea of hitting the ground running, which I both love and hate that phrase because there's only so much you can do. Like you said, you can offer thought partnership and leadership. You can just be a sounding board. But the idea that you can come in and just start, batting 1,000 and like just winning on day one
Yep.
when things might work, and yeah, like let's keep the things moving, and maybe we augment the things that work, and are there ways that we can create even more efficiency, or and when we come across those things that don't work, or cause us issues, whether it's internally or cross functionally, or even, gosh forbid, externally facing, what's the low hanging fruit? What can we do today that isn't going to disturb much, but might create some wins, create a win for us and maybe even some time for us internally? I have a
So
story that comes to mind if you don't
please
mind
tell
if
it.
I
I
share it.
love stories. Oh yes, no, I want good and bad stories. I want to hear one that went sideways, and I want to hear one that was like just like me, just leaps and bounds ahead of everything you ever expected.
So I started at a company. I won't name the company because I don't want to sort of potentially even out the person. I started a company and I discovered very quickly that there was a conference room right across from where recruiting sat. And even though the company used Outlook to manage calendar availability and booking, people were constantly interrupting and just walking into the conference room. So just sort of absent-minded behavior and not really thinking through like, hey, that door is closed. Maybe I should knock. Or, hey, is the conference room even available to go into at this time? Maybe I should go check the tools that I have at my disposal. But recruiting ended up being tasked with putting the 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 calendar of events for the conference room on the door every single day, printing it out and taping it to the door.
Huh.
And like it's one little task, right? But it's if you have many of those little tasks throughout your day, they take your time up. And then are you really contributing at like maybe the higher level things that you need to be focused on more intently and devote more time and attention to? And so I just said, let's just stop doing that. Let's stop doing that and see what happens. And the look on my employee's face on my team was like sheer horror that I would ask her to do something like this. I think she was excited about it, but also like, what's going to happen? Am I going to get in trouble? And I said, and she even asked me, like, what happens if, like, what if I get in trouble or what? This is my decision. I will own the decision. I'll even
Yeah.
like whatever it takes. Like I own it. But let's just stop doing that. And nobody ever said a word. And I guess enough time had passed that people started using the Outlook tool and but nothing happened. Nobody said a word. Nothing broke. Nobody got angry. Like these are just these little things of like, hey, that really helped my employee. Like, even though it's this one little tiny thing, it's a nuisance amongst
Yeah.
another number of nuisances that we ended up fixing later on down the line. But this was an easy one. So,
So can I
uh,
tell a story that's kind of like in that similar vein of like,
sure.
yeah. So I worked at a company a while back, and I had a excellent staff member that worked for me, but she would always like she did all these things that she'd always done. And I would, I asked the questions before I changed the processes, like, why are we doing them? But a lot of them were like, I felt like it was going above and beyond what the people were getting out of the document. Like a lot of times, like people probably just scroll and see the number at the bottom. So I did a similar thing. I was like, let's stop doing that and only start providing this and see if anybody asks any. If somebody asks questions, you'll be like, oh, our bad. We'll do it again. But nobody ever asked any questions. So it became like the mantra of like during the whole time there is like everything is like, don't give more than people ask for. Give them exactly what they ask for. And then if they want more, then they can ask for more. But you don't
Yeah.
need to over complicate something just in case, because if they don't need it, you just wasted 8 hours of a day doing something that no one's ever going to use. So like completely don't waste the time. So that was like strip it down to the bare essentials, of what it was. But it's just a similar
Cool.
thing. It's like, let's just stop doing that and see if anybody really notices and if the behavior changes. And a lot of times they probably don't, just for the record.
No. No, because there's so much information coming at us in the digital age, whether it's hundreds of emails a day or text messages or whatever. Um, if we can eliminate some of those, like, yes, please, I'm all for it.
So let's talk a little bit about culture too, because you had mentioned that, like I said. So you, as a independent recruiter, you have to deal with multiple companies that have multiple different cultures. But how much now does culture come up when you're doing recruiting in any like for even from the person being recruited or the company talking about their culture when they're giving you the idea of what the recruiting is going to look like?
Probably every single time.
Oh,
If the company is not leading that conversation, like between consultant and company, then I'll lead it and I'll drive it. And I think every single candidate I talk to, I mean, if it's 95+%, I would say, are asking about like what's it like there. And I tried as a consultant, like I can't get quite as deep, like that's fair to
yeah,
say,
because
as
you're
the way
not
it was
there. Yeah,
not there. I'm not experiencing the organization as an employee. It is different. It is meant to be different. And companies that treat contractors the same as employees can sometimes land in hot water because they are meant to be separate. They're separate classifications. So, but the things that I tend to lean into are things that everyone would experience. Things like communication. What's the cadence like? If I'm giving it, am I getting it? And if I'm getting it, how quickly am I giving it back? What am I giving? How much of it am I giving? How open is the company to having their assumptions challenged? Like that's really important to me. If it's like this is the way we've always done it, so this is how we're going to do it, then like I'm not the guy. That doesn't mean that the way it's working can't continue to work. But if we're unwilling to at least look and challenge and question, then I'm not sure that's a place where my time is best spent. So those are some really basic
yeah.
things that I can communicate back. And then, I want to spend time with HR if I can, or at least even ask hiring managers HR type questions of like, how often does the company meet together? What types of things are talked about? What information is shared by the executive team? Like, How much transparency is there in like what are our goals and how are we doing against them? That was something that I really appreciated at um, I really appreciated our quarterly town halls where there was a rigorous but, concise rundown of quarter to date, year to date,
Really? Even
previous year to
sharing
this
numbers and
year.
stuff?
Mhm. Yep.
Are they a public company?
No, no,
That's
they're
really
private.
cool, actually.
It was incredible, and, like, as a recruiter, I'm a sponge. 'Cause like I said, like and I'm always gonna filter, like, what information can I share out versus not. I'm very super
Yeah,
mindful of that, but, like, I might get numbers in a meeting, but I can translate that out to, we've had X number of consecutive quarters of positive comp or growth, right? Or it's been
yeah.
flat for so long or whatever, if that is relevant to the conversation. But that's, just knowing that that type of detail, I think is critical
I
for HR and
that's
recruiting.
Yeah, because I remember, like, one of the things that I did think that Fandango did that was super strong was we would get together at least once a quarter, and they would talk about, like, they'd have our little town halls in that big lunchroom that we had, and, but everything was measured in tickets sold, not in financials, and I was privy to some of the financials, so I could see how we were really doing, but I think a lot of people that don't, like, marketing doesn't usually have that level of insight into that, like finance does, and the customer service doesn't, those sorts of things. Um, I think that that's really cool that they would share that because, like, I mean, even at my current company, we are a private company, so we don't want to share exact information. I, in my role, can see that information, but it's not something that like I share down to my team. I'm just like, well, we're doing good, we're expecting this type of growth next year or whatnot, but but we can't really say specifics. But I say like if you can, like it's really a big thing right now that even at our company and I've seen it at most companies and everybody I talk to is like, especially in the post-COVID world, is engagement. And how do you get engagement when a large chunk of your workforce is at home, playing with the kids, doing whatever they got to do, not really being engaged, not coming into the office. Like I went into the office yesterday. I'm making an effort to go into the office a little more just to try and just be seen, have FaceTime in there. But like we're a fully remote company. So I was like, there was like 6 of us total in our big building yesterday. But like, it's how you get people to buy in to your company. Now, they're not saying sharing your financials is the way to do that, but making people excited about the company's trajectory. For me as an employee, like I really get excited about that. Oh my God, we're growing this much. We're doing this. Like last year we were here, now we're here. Like started from the bottom, now we're here. Like it's cool. It gets a lot of buy-in, and I feel that it helps for my engagement when I'm aware of where
It's
we
huge.
are, where we're going as a company. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think that and we would also like even if there were numbers that weren't positive, we would be then talking about like, okay, what are we doing about it?
Yeah. How can we
Here are the
right the
here
ship?
here are the here are the adjustments that we're making to try to impact this number in a positive way. So all that stuff is amazing. And I think when you're connected to the business in every way that you can be, whether it's the personal or the just understanding what we're trying to accomplish, how we're doing and getting there, how my team plugs into it and how each individual sort of plugs into that higher level business objective and goal set is key. And those are the
That's
things that I
another
also want to
thing.
try to communicate.
Yeah, like another great thing is like how does your team fit into the overall picture? Because so many, like especially middle managers, don't communicate. Oh, like we are launching a new payment method, but we have to sign off on it because we do the fraud on that, and like we can't launch. Like our team is so important that we can't launch in that territory until we've approved it and we know what's going on. And that could be super impactful. Or like we're driving all of the negative customer feedback because we're declining all of these orders, like all of those things. Like how does your piece, how do you fit into the company? That's an excellent point too.
Yeah, one of the
So
coolest things that I've observed this during this post-COVID, whatever you want to call it, is how like departments that are traditionally sort of siloed, and I'll
mm,
just point to one in particular, like accounting, like the light bulbs that were going off as COVID was just unfolding of like, hey, actually accounting really does need to be a strategic business partner. And this is a slap in the face as to why we need to be thinking about it differently and watching it evolve over the last 3, 4 years and the types of people that the companies that I've worked with would be more interested in hiring pre-COVID versus post-COVID is really an interesting shift. Like
That's
there was before there was maybe less focus on, does this, level one accountant, can we put them in front of the directors or can we put them in front of the C-suite? Didn't really matter pre-COVID. Post-COVID, everybody's, maybe almost everybody, if not everybody's, got to be able to have those conversations, or at least be able to report up in a meaningful way.
That's super interesting to know that there too. Like, one time, our accounting department at Fandango, like just to tell another story about our old days there. I was still a contractor. I hadn't been converted over to direct employee yet. And they were sending me to one of the big conferences that's the Merchant Risk Council. Everybody that is listening to this, we all go to that. But I was still broke because it takes a little while to catch back up. So they actually had to give me petty cash, like, and I had to sign like cash out of an envelope to go to the conference and pay for my stuff, and then bring all the receipts back and like give them the cash back. So that was super cool. But good old accounting,
Petty
again.
cash. I remember the days of petty cash.
Yeah, I doubt any company really has much petty cash, if any, anymore. But like they had it
You'd
all.
probably end up on some government
Yeah.
list if you're running petty cash. I don't know.
Yeah, I had to. They gave me a big old stack, man, and I had to bring it all back.
It's gotta be rigorously accounted for.
And
Absolutely.
it was before I knew like how like expenses worked and everything. So I was like super careful and like didn't know what I could and couldn't buy. So I was like going hungry and like trying to eat only the conference food, which is like never good.
So
Like
gross.
I've had enough
It's
dry
so gross.
chicken and shitty salmon in my life.
Yes.
Like I'm done.
Dry, rubbery chicken. Yeah, nasty. Yeah, yeah.
Just
Ugh.
country potatoes, everybody, country potatoes with onions on it.
It's just green beans. I mean, I love green
Yeah,
beans and potatoes, but yeah, that's not where it's at.
3 days in a row and you're sitting at the Aria. Yeah, no, I gotta
Oh,
have some sushi now.
yeah.
So I have some questions about recruiting, if we could.
Go for it. Yeah.
Because some things have changed in the last couple of years. So obviously people are asking for more money than ever before. And then different types of work arrangements, hybrid, all that sort of thing. So my question for you is, what are your thoughts on how many rounds a lot of hiring managers are making candidates go through these days? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that I get nervous when there's a lot of rounds and a lot of people. I think it depends. I think it depends on job level, really, and sort of like skill set required and seniority. Um, is it an executive that we're hiring? I think there's a reasons why we should and I don't like to lean into hierarchy for many of my answers, but I think the more complex the job is and the more it interacts directly with other departments, the more layers we may want to involve.
Yeah.
But if I'm a hiring manager and I can't hire, an entry level role or an individual contributor level role at, the mid level, that without, bringing 5 or 6 people and 3 or 4 different layers of it, like there's something broken that as a recruiting leader, I'm going to want to dig into and challenge. And I do that consistently. I've done that consistently. I've waged war on, sort of bureaucratic interview
Yeah.
processes that
Good.
turn candidates off for a long, long time. And I think it's, you know, I think there are a number of reasons why people might do it. They might lack confidence in their ability to make hiring decisions because it's not easy. I was reading an article today that says like a bad hire costs you 3 times what it costs to hire a good person. Like in
Yeah, that
terms
makes
of like,
sense. And yeah, and like what's really sucks about like bad hires right now too is like if you get a bad hire, it's so hard to fire that like you're kind of just like stuck until they really, really leave, because like you can put them on a PIP, but what does that even mean anymore? And now like most companies like want like double PIPs and stuff now. It's like you kind of just gotta like be like, I'm gonna pay this guy until they're so bored they leave, and that's just it's just where we are now, because you honor that's one thing I always liked about hiring like contractors, except for the how much they cost. But like it's basically getting a trial run, and then I
yes,
could be like, we're a month in and like, they just aren't getting it, I could be like, okay, like we're gonna try something else, and then off they go and do the other thing. But like you pay for that luxury, in
You
billable
do.
hours instead. So
You
yeah,
do. It definitely provides more flexibility. I think, yeah, the PIP process or the performance review process generally, I think is still an area of opportunity for HR to continue to evolve and innovate. And I think we're seeing some of it. I think you know, I think
yeah.
managers should be giving their people feedback in real time, or as close to real
Yeah,
time as possible.
and a lot of the
That's
cultural fit places like that are excelling at the cultural fit do, because you don't want to be surprised by a pip is what like I've always like felt like is like you don't want to be
yep.
told for the last like year that you've been doing a great job and all of a sudden you're on a pip for performance and they're like, "Well, I thought you said I was doing great," you know? Like you got to tell
I've
people like
seen it happen.
you could say you're doing great here, but you're not doing great here. Like you can say that, people aren't going to hate you. It's all about how you
Yes.
approach it too. For me as a manager, like tone of voice and don't be a dick. But there are times when you need to, like, if you've had those conversations, I need you to start doing better here, where the tone needs to get a little more serious. Um, but give people a chance.
And
That's where, like, like I joke about like, oh, I like contracts because I can get rid of them, but like there has to be a middle ground between can't fire and like you could fire somebody at the drop of a hat. There has to be a little bit of a middle ground that I don't think we're there yet. Especially coming out
yeah,
of COVID, everybody's so scared of everything.
it makes me think about this conversation. I was hiring, I think it would have been a director of legal affairs at a company that I worked at. And I didn't, I didn't ask him, like, I just enjoyed talking to the guy and we were having a really fun and engaging conversation. So it wasn't like some, typical boring interview or what you would imagine a boring interview could be. But we were just two guys who hit it off and we're talking about the work and talking about the business. And I just sort of asked him, like, tell me your thoughts about at will employment and like, what does that really mean now? And this would have been probably 10 years ago by now. Yeah,
Okay.
probably 10 years ago by now. Cause like, what does it really mean? It's supposed to mean for any reason and any time.
Should be in
And,
that, but
and in California, I believe that it's still considered to be at will employment, even though it's not. It's like at will, but,
you'll be hearing from
um,
my lawyer next week.
and I think, yeah, there's somewhere in that, but, or we just need to sort of do away with this concept of at will employment and, think about like, I don't know, are there periodic contracts that get renewed or not renewed or something like that.
That's
But
an interesting idea.
this
Yeah.
idea of I can, but I can't. Like I can let you go, but I can't. But then the employee also can just walk away on day one and has no obligation back to the company. So like there's the balance both ways that I see. Because I've had people, I this makes me think of another story. I was working. This was really earlier in my career in HR. And we hired this person and he showed up to the office and it wasn't like this, it wasn't the sexiest office. It wasn't the nicest campus that I've ever worked at, but it was cool. And like we all had fun. And so we were
Yeah.
many of us were in our early mid 20s and we were just fucking off and having fun and doing cool work. And so this guy shows up on day one. He drives up into the driveway. He gets to the guard shack and he goes, "This place is a fucking dump. I'm not working here." And he literally just drove off.
Serious?
100% serious. I've had executives email on the day of the start date, the day of arrival, say, "I'm not coming." So like that's is equally shitty, but maybe in a different, maybe
Yeah.
it's not as equally shitty, but it's pretty shitty
You know,
to do
you
that.
they it's that same thing. It's like a lot of companies still like that old thing. You got 90 day, first 90 days, then we'll see if you work. But like, great, I'm here less than 90 days. Like, I'm still a California employee. What are you going to do about that? At the end of the day, like, but I do think that you're right. The balance of power seems to be a little bit, it used to be for so long, the balance of power was with the employer where like, you're fired, pack your shit and go. And, but now it's like, uh, if I fire you today, I'm gonna get
Yeah,
sued tomorrow. I'm gonna have to pay you something to make you shut up and go away. When me as the employee, I could just literally roll around and be like, "Yeah, fuck this job, I'm out." And like I could guard shack it right on out of here, if I wanted to. But
it was crazy. We were all standing around going, the hell just happened? Like what?
What type of role was it? Like an executive role, or was it just like a regular guy?
No, it was, I guess I'll just say it was a regular guy, regular type of individual contributor role.
It's you know what else I'm seeing like right now, and just in the world is like I don't know what's going on, but like people that are they got they're green circled, if you know what I mean, on
Yeah.
LinkedIn. Um, and they're like being super choosy. Like me, if I was ever green circled, like I'm taking the first thing I can get while I'm still looking for something else, you know. But I'm seeing people like, yeah, nah, I'm good. I'm like, but you're like, nah, right now. Like you're completely not. Like, what are we doing here? Like,
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think we're in this interesting time where we're all sort of standing around questioning all of the systems that we exist within or operate or build, which is cool. And I think this is one that we need to be thinking about, like always that employer-employee relationship and where's the balance and what are the obligations and responsibilities that each party should have to each other. Because really at the end, like I'm not a believer that profit should be the end all be all.
Yeah,
I really believe that like the common good or like and not just for the employees, but even from a social perspective of like, what is this company doing to contribute? And like that to me is as much, if not more important than the profit motive, which obviously you have to make money. I get it.
yeah, but
Like
see that
let's
this is
all
where
make
that
lots of money.
let's all
But
make
there's got
lots
to
of
be
money,
more
but
to it. There's got to be more to it than that.
this thing, it's like growth at all cost. That's
Yeah.
that's like this new thing that's coming out of COVID too, is like companies always have to be growing. And like I just was reading a thing about Stanley, you know, the mugs that everybody's obsessed with right now. We
Yes.
got one in the house now. But
Right.
you got the 30 something, right?
Yeah.
I'm I
32
guess
maybe.
I'm so old school. I'm stuck in my my Yeti era still. I'm not cool anymore.
Yeti gear is rad gear, dude. Like those Yeti coolers that seem to cost like an arm and a leg. I want one,
They
but
they
I
keep it
gotta
cold,
find one
dude.
on sale though.
I was in
I
Singapore
have
like a month
I
ago.
have those Yeti stainless steel mugs and they work so well. Go ahead. Sorry.
This is like my savior for like long distance travel or airports because like I fly a lot and I never know when I'm gonna see another like a water. And I'm super guilty like that when I hit the ground, I party. Like when I'm like I'm in conference mode, I'm like, let's get some cocktails, let's have that meeting at the bar. So like I never know when I'm gonna see water again. So
Right.
I fill this thing up and like I put a couple ice cubes in there, and this thing will keep me through a 3-day conference lightly hydrated just to the right degree. But I'm gonna have to the Stanley fits better in my car's cup holder because this one does not at all. So I'm probably gonna have to invest. But
I've
let me
seen
tell my
these
Stanley
videos
story
of
now.
I've
Oh,
seen these
no,
videos of people fighting over these mugs in
did you
Target
see the
or
one
wherever.
yesterday? The guy was like blasting through a Starbucks, like tearing through a Starbucks to get the Stanleys.
No.
Woo.
Oh my god.
Everybody, it kind of got overshadowed
That
by the guy that was jumping over the onto
the
the
guy who
judge in
yeeted to the
Arizona.
judge. Yeah.
Dude, that guy, like, put that guy like when he gets out, put him on a basketball team because that dude, he was like 10 feet in the air, whole body. Like,
That was crazy. That was crazy.
I haven't
And
sent a
like
video to a lot of people in a long time, but I sent that video to a lot of people.
just like out of nowhere too. Like just
Just whole
wild.
body. But my Stanley story is this is a
Go
growth at
ahead.
all
Yeah, yeah,
cost
yeah.
thing. It's
Okay.
Stanley. This I didn't know until I read this article that Stanley was the same one as like probably both our parents' old thermos, the green blue thermos company, the metal
Mhm.
one that like the old like blue collar steel mill guys used to like smack their friends with and beat them up. Probably seen a couple of movies, but that's the same company. Like
Yep.
Stanley isn't a new hotness tech company. This is like a 150-year-old fabrication company
It's pretty
that
amazing.
had been just they've been trucking along with, like you said, employees are making money, people are happy, they went to work, they did their job, the company was everybody got paid, they probably had pizza lunch once a year, you know, like a shitty company picnic, but everything was fine. And like we don't have that anymore because we're like, we have to grow this company 50% year over year. And if we don't, we're laying off everybody. What happened to like the days where I could just like, look, I'm making good money. I'm happy where I'm at. Company's making, we're not losing money. We're making profit. Boss man gets a new boat every 3 years. We're good. What happened to those days? No?
Cheap money and cheap credit are probably the
Yeah.
answers, or at least a couple of the answers.
Yeah.
Greed. I
It's
mean, who
just
knows? Yeah.
so let's talk about salary as we close up here because it's pretty much kind of the
Yes.
last thing, and then we'll talk about what you how my people can find you. Salary range laws in Colorado, New York, and California are you got to put them up there. So pretty much a lot of people, especially in tech companies, just seem to be throwing up the range. Range is like 18 football fields wide. But
Can be. Yeah.
so what do you think about that? What do you think about the law? What do you think about salary transparency? How do you approach it?
I'm a huge proponent of transparency. It's one of my personal core values. I think that I don't like that a law might be required for companies to be more transparent. I think it should just be the way that it is, and it shouldn't be about, hey, what are you making now? And
Yeah.
then you sort of sugar it up 5-10% to try to attract them. It should be like, how do we value this? And this is what sophisticated compensation departments do, and they work closely with HR business partners and recruiting to figure out like what is our comp philosophy? Where do we want to pay in the market? We can pay at the median or the
It
midpoint
seems
of
like that's
or
what everybody
median of the
does
range,
now is they get this range
the
and they're like 50%
25th
is where we're going.
percentile or the 75th percentile. Um, and then you sort of map to that. And then you are just transparent about like, this is how we value the job. And your experience will sort of dictate where within that range we might pay you. Uh, yeah,
Yeah.
I don't like when I see a range. I was looking at something today, and it said that the base salary range was anywhere from 150 to like almost 400. That to me is just crazy.
So like
Now I guess
if you're in San Francisco, you'll get this, but if you're in New Mexico, you're gonna get, right 149.9.
and maybe it really is true that a candidate who could be successful could be anywhere in that range, but it just seems a little bit broad to me. But anyway,
Yeah.
huge proponent of it. I'm always transparent with candidates in the interview process about it, even if I'm not required to be. It's something again that I
Do you get
tell
out of the
my
way
clients
early?
first call.
Because that's what like all these people that keep saying like wait till the end. No, because I don't want to go through these 8 rounds like you're saying
Yeah,
earlier, only to find out we're 100 grand off from where we need to be, you know? Like let's get this over with. Like find out if we're gonna mesh together here at all.
yeah. To me, it's first phone call, and if for some reason it doesn't get covered in the first phone call, it should be like top of the list for the second phone call. It should never wait until the end because exactly what you said. Like if we've literally just wasted so many people's time and energy and commitment to find out that this person wasn't even hireable to begin with. And then everybody gets excited about a candidate that was never really realistic to begin with.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, I
that's
just
super
see one
frustrating.
recently that came in like 100 grand off, and I was like, "Oof." I was like, "'Cause everything about them was great," and then it's just not gonna happen, you know? I will say,
Yeah.
like, one of the things too that's driving me bonkers is, like, all these companies that are doing, like, you can work from anywhere. So, like, you get hired, let's say, like well, I mean, remote work seems to be going away. It seems to be coming to hybrid. So you gotta be closer to an office. So everybody that moved to, like, Montana's gotta move back. But, like, the companies I saw companies that were doing and one of them said it to me once too, is like, if you're in LA, you get paid this, but if you move here, you get paid that. It's like, my skill's the same. Like, nothing about what I bring to the table changes. It's I cost what I cost, no matter where I'm at. If I'm living in Singapore, if I'm living in the Philippines, if I'm living in New York, if I'm living in Montana. Like, I cost what I cost to do that job. It's so weird to me that companies are trying to, like, change it because, like, they're not paying my mortgage. Like, I could not have a mortgage or I could have a mortgage. My salary is the same. So why do they care? Well, we're paying you LA prices to live in LA. Like, but you don't know how much I pay. I could have 5,000 roommates and my rent is $5. You don't know that, you know, or I could have an $8,500 mortgage like I do now. But, life is life. And I cost what I
Yeah.
cost.
It's an interesting challenge that companies are facing and workers to a degree. I in my role, I try to, be that bridge. And so I do see both sides of like, if the
Yeah.
cost of living is X here, but it's X less 10% there, can we rationalize that in some way to bring everybody together?
But then you could always go get a candidate from that area versus the one that
Could.
you're yeah.
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 Yeah, you could. I mean, my situation when I was, during COVID, I was living in LA and my family and I, we moved to Pennsylvania, but I, maintained that job. Um, and those
Yeah.
conversations, they came up. I actually brought them up, and just said, is this something that, you feel would be necessary? If it is, I'm open to it. Cause I wanted to stay in the role for, a
That was
while
nice of
longer.
you. That's very
Um,
proactive of you.
and they said, no, no, you make what you make. And that's that. So,
I see. I like that. More
um,
companies should take that stance.
it's where that's where my heart is. And that's sort of what I believe to be fundamentally true. Like if you're willing to pay this, then you're going to pay it to the person regardless of where they live. But I can see why companies are pushing back.
So as we wrap up here, because it's playoff season, are you a Steelers fan?
I love Pennsylvania football, except Penn State. So yes, I love the Steelers, but at my heart, I'm a diehard Eagles fan. That's because I grew up on the
Okay,
other side of the state,
that's
just outside Philadelphia.
okay.
Yeah, I
So
like
you,
the Steelers.
I'm sorry about what the 49ers are about to do to you guys again, but
Oh man, boy, what an absolute free fall collapse over the last 5 weeks for
well,
the
dude,
Eagles. Just a disaster. I mean, San Francisco broke that team. It was very easy to
but
see that.
Matt Patricia, he's not the answer, dude. Like, what is the deal with that?
I don't know. I think it was just a sort of a Hail Mary
Dude, he won one
desperation
Super
move.
Bowl, right, with Brady, which was Brady and Belichick's fault. And then ever since then, everything he's touched has been shite. And I can't believe that the Eagles, who were such a powerhouse all the way through, made the change there and then brought that guy in. Like, no, that's a no.
It hasn't worked out.
Yeah. Well,
Which in hindsight, probably obvious. I mean, we know for the Patriots, Belichick is the architect of that defense, and you're just sort of taking what he has designed and built, and then you're executing it, which is probably a lot easier to do than being the architect and mastermind and strategist of it.
well, we'll see. We'll see. Playoff times are here. One more week.
It's here.
One more week. It sucks.
One-
I had to. I accidentally messed my fantasy football league that I commission. So the championship is actually being played this week when like half the people are being benched.
It's the
So
worst. I played fantasy football one time, and I ended up it was different than it was a little bit different than it is now. But I had Peyton Manning and Donovan McNabb as my quarterbacks. And in the last 2 games of the season, this
when
was in
McNabb
2
was on the
would have been
Eagles.
yeah, it would have been '04 when the Birds went to the
Oh,
Super Bowl.
when way back then. Yeah.
And both teams benched the quarterback. So I had no quarterback on my roster for the last 2 weeks of the season, and I ended up going from first to dead last and not even making the playoffs. And I was like, "This is bullshit. Like, I'm not like, what
Yeah.
ridiculous."
I
So,
ran
yeah,
the Fandango, the official Fandango fantasy football league for like the whole time I was there. I was a commissioner of that one. So
nice.
always a good time. It was a big money league too, and it was a lot of fun. A lot of shit got talked by old Joe that sat up at the front desk. Man, that
I
guy would
bet.
just rail on people.
Woo. Yes, sir.
So as we wrap up, thank you very much for your time. I
Well,
do want to make sure that people know where to find your company. You and your wife are running this company. If anybody is listening that is a hiring manager would like to have you do the work for them, I highly recommend it. I mean, listen to his calm voice, everybody. He's going to get the shit done. So, how do they find you? Where do they go from there?
yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me. This has been fun. It's been great to reconnect here. I know we've sort of
It
sporadically
has.
stayed over the years here and there, but having these opportunities to spend more time with you has been great. So I hope we'll continue to do that.
Me too.
For my company, it's called Bridgeview Solutions. My wife and I, my boys too, we love bridges, and the bridges out here in Western Pennsylvania and Ohio and this sort of broader area are just unbelievable. And my website is bridgeview.solutions. It's not bridgeviewsolutions.com or anything like that. It's bridgeview.solutions. And my email is mark@bridgeview.solutions.
And I'll link all that in the description, everybody, so you don't got to be like jotting it down on paper. There will be fun links on all of that. And now the bridge behind you makes a lot more sense to me. So yeah,
Yes.
that's great. Well, I really like it has been great to reconnect. Let's absolutely do this more often. I will, if I have needs, I'm definitely going to reach out to you because I trust your recruiting.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you again for changing my life. I'll never forget
You're
those
welcome.
days and those emails and what happened there. But thank you for being a part of my show. Uh, yeah, Mark, man,
Thank
this
you.
has got to change my life. Everybody.
I appreciate those kind words, but I helped, and you've done the work. You've done the hardest part of it. So congratulations to you for everything you've achieved and will achieve.
Thank you so much. And I will hopefully keep doing that. Hopefully. But everybody else, thanks for listening to today's episode, and we will see you all in a couple of weeks. Bye. Thanks for listening to today's show. Again, I want to thank Sardine for making it possible. We've all heard about how AI can help us reduce manual work from increased fraud attack volumes, but figuring out how to apply it alone is a massive undertaking. With Sardine, you get fraud tools for your own fraud squad and access to their entire in-house fraud squad to help you use it. From KYC to onboarding fraud and payment fraud, with over 4,000 signals like device, email, and telco, even AML monitoring. Like I said at the top of the show, you're not buying just one of the best tools, but the whole team behind it. Come see, like I said, what literally everyone is talking about by visiting www.sardine.ai. Thanks for listening.